This crowd rises to its feet. Vaccaro slammed it home. Garland left wing, 3-ball. Perfect! Garland one of the lane, lob to Mobley. Pow! And Allen blocked the shot at the rim. Pow! With the left hand and a foul.
Welcome to the Chase Down Podcast, part of the Cavs media family. I'm your host, Justin Rowan. Support for this podcast is brought to you by Fubo TV. Watch over 100 channels. Watch over 100 channels of live sports and TV for half the cost of cable. There's no contract and no commitment. Try for free at FuboTV.com. Interrupting me there was my co-host, Carter Rodriguez. Carter, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. I got a little frog in my throat to start, and I was trying to clear it out before we started, but I think it's just going to live there for the rest of the pod.
That's really encouraging. I was about to apologize on the front end that if I sound a little rough, it's because I believe I have caught a bug. This might be my first time getting sick in like 2 years. So you know what? Of course it happens right before we go on the podcast. It's not braggy. That means I didn't have a life. Laughing at me as well is a man who is another one of these guys, Carter, that we bring on that has such a large byline because he's just always.
Bro, I was like, what? Who do I even attribute you to in the bio? Is a disaster.
Another one of these, these grinders that's just always out there doing good work. Bobby Manning of CLNS Media, as well as Celtics blog, Garden Report, Dome Theory, a million other places. Bobby, it's been long overdue. How are you doing, man?
You missed Boston Sports Journal. Don't forget them.
Oh my goodness! Look, now who's braggy? Now who's braggy, Carter?
Wow!
It's good to be here, guys. I've always been a fan of the show. Always have talked with Justin over the years. Had Carter on, over the off-season.
This is our first time with you on our particular platform, though.
Yeah, definitely. And luckily for you guys, I love the Cavs. The last couple of years, they've grown on me. I love this year's team. I was thrilled with Friday's game. I told Justin earlier that was one of the best regular season games I've seen from the Celtics over the last couple of years, and they definitely impressed me, and they're convincing me that they could do some big things this year in year one of Mitchell and company.
Wish I could say the same for the Celtics, because I still hate y'all.
Yeah, we actually on our last podcast, Carter was even just talking about how he was rooting for the Warriors. I did not do such a thing. I my allegiances swung.
See, that was a tough choice for you guys.
A horrific, truly a horrific conference finals, even because I hate Miami too. So I was truly adrift at sea through the latter stages of the playoffs last year.
Well, I was thrilled the Heat didn't win because they were just like hanging on by a thread health-wise. That would have been awful finals if they won. So like eventually that's kind of part of my rooting interest is seeing like, all right, I don't want this wrecked, injured team moving on to the next round and ruining that round. So that was as big of a motivation for me as anything at that point.
But there's always the advantage from my perspective when that happens, because then if Steph wins, you can say, well, they were injured. Yeah. We can dismiss it.
Mickey ring.
Yeah, you can just poo-poo the whole thing. But we're really happy to have you on here. Obviously, Cavs and Celtics played a hell of a game on Friday. And the Cavs are now going into their first national TV game on Wednesday. That'll be on ESPN. Incredibly excited for that. Before we get into that matchup, I do want to let our listeners know that there is a new episode of The Road Back. I actually just watched it before we came on here. You guys should definitely check this out. A really great episode. Ricky Rubio says goal for the season is to win a championship, which has me ready to run through a wall. And there was also a really, I thought, powerful part where Dan Gilbert was talking to the locker room. Great to see Dan after the health issues that he's had, but talking about why the Cavs are dedicating this season to Nick Gilbert and his battle with NF, the health issues he's had, and why they have the bow tie on the warm-up, and kind of how the resiliency of Nick Gilbert is kind of what they're dedicating this season to. And you look at the Friday game against Boston, and that was another example of this Cavs team being really resilient this year, going down in hostile territory and coming away with a win. Bobby, with that game, were you surprised, like when you saw that the Cavs initially jump out to the lead, give up the lead and then go down big? Were you surprised that the Cavs were able to come back and win in the way they did in Boston?
Yeah, I'd say so, because the Celtics got off to that roaring start, and you're missing Garland. You're kind of at a disadvantage there too. Karis LeVert, as we talked about earlier, I was thrilled with the way he stepped up. I actually saw him in warmups just hitting everything, and the guys will hit everything in warmups, but he looked especially good to me given the start he's gotten off to this year. I thought he was so important down the stretch, and not only was he great, but I thought Mitchell did a great job supporting him, like a good ghost screen to free him up downhill at one point, going right by Smart. He obviously had the two key offensive rebounds in crunch time. And that's where I really thought the Cavs were done, because Jaylen Brown throws down that monster slam on transition. I think they go ahead on that play. That he misses a free throw, which hurt. Cavs missed a free throw late too. So there were just these different swing moments down the stretch where I wasn't really ruling out either team. But I did think after that Brown dunk, the Celtics had it in hand, and LeVert made those two big plays, getting the first offensive rebound back to Mitchell for a score, and then hitting a go-ahead three himself after the second one.
How much do you think the Cavs comeback was due to some of the, obviously the Cavs are going to war without Darius, but without either of the Williamses, which I haven't quite figured out how to type that yet, how to pluralize Williams.
Williamses,
I had a lot of tweets that took a lot of rewrites. However, without the Williamses, how much do you think that comeback was a result of kind of the personnel that the Cavs were forcing Boston to play? Like, I don't think Rob Mazzulla, God bless Luke Cornett's heart, don't think Cornette's going to be playing a ton deep into the postseason. How much do you think that affected them in kind of letting the Cavs back into the game after they had taken control?
It definitely, because I don't think they wanted to start the game with those looks, and Cornette hadn't played much to that point yet in the season. He got hurt early in training camp, and Derek White and small ball had sort of dominated their lineups. But you saw Allen going at Derek White. Mobley was trying to get after him in the post. They were forcing the Celtics into some of those switch mismatches. I think the Celtics fouled like 10 times in the first quarter. So you made the Celtics go bigger. Cornette, I thought, did an okay job. He was forcing the Cavs in the mid-range shots, which they actually liked. I talked to JB Bickerstaff after the game about, like, all right, you got a team in a drop like that. What do you respond with? Because obviously you're trying to play through your bigs and stuff. And he loved the fact that they were getting wide open mid-range shots. Not everybody does, but the Cavs took advantage of them, hit a bunch of them, got going to hit some threes late by getting that rhythm. And I thought they approached that defensive look that the Celtics threw at them really well out there. Not to mention, Mitchell went right at the 7-2 guy and just smashed one off his head.
Yep.
Oh, man. That was an awesome dunk.
Yeah, JB likes to wax poetic every now and then about the mid-range shot, and I think it was like such an important part of their game last season because Garland's ability to either hit the floater, get that pull up at the free throw line, that like threat of the mid-range opened up opportunities in the dunker spot for Mobley and Allen in a year where they really didn't have spacing. And obviously now with Donovan Mitchell, you're able to get a lot more three-pointers up. The Cavs had the second most three-pointers attempted in a regular season game in their last matchup. And I'm curious to see now because this second matchup against Boston, both of these teams playing each other for the second time, there's the opportunity to make adjustments. And both teams are also appear, at least Grant Williams is going to be back for Boston, and Darius Garland, full participant in practice, is at least an encouraging sign that he could be back. So both teams could have new pieces that kind of change how these teams are going to make adjustments going into that game.
Yeah, especially Grant, the way he's starting this year. If you looked at his stat sheet, I know he's low usage, so that you have to take that into account when you look at his numbers so far, but he's been perfect nearly to start this year. Like from the field, he's shooting 70%, he's 66% from three. Again, low
that's
usage.
Dean Wade numbers, man.
Yeah, and averaging 10 points, getting on the boards. He defends pretty much every position. I know Jared Weiss, when the extension talks were going on with him, wrote something that surprised me, that he was actually like a top 10 most versatile defender last year in the league in terms of positions guarded. And that showed in the playoffs, being able to guard a guy like Giannis, a guy like Durant. So he's become invaluable. And they didn't get a deal with him done. It's looking like he could be one of the sneaky, most valuable guys on the market next summer, even though he is restricted and the Celtics will have those rights to match on him. But he took a ginormous step last year he took an even bigger one to start this year. It looks like he's attacking closeouts. He's still that guy that can defend and play above his height defensively. And he's certainly one of the better, catch and shoot three guys at this point, going, what was it, 8 for 15 in that game 7?
He also is just super confident too, like a lot of these like role players that can kind of wane.
Do you see him in the Batman costume? That's confidence.
Out of control. He kind of feels like
a role player costume, Carter. That's a leader costume.
That's a Batman. He's no Robin. I find guys like that interesting. Kind of feels like he's evolutionary PJ Tucker. Just a guy who's going to be around freaking forever.
I like that.
Who has kind of found his niche. He doesn't ever need to be more than it. And I do think that the Celtics miss him. Like you look at, obviously you're going to trade Daniel Tice for Malcolm Brogdon 10 times out of 10, but it does feel like their backup depth is hurting as a result.
Yeah, who would have thought they'd be starting opening night with Noah Vonleh playing big minutes? I never imagined that, and he was in China last year. So that's the kind of depth that they've been searching for inside. Now they want to go smaller. That's something. It's interesting. Joe Mazzulla takes over this year, says, "Oh, I'm not trying to rock the boat. We have this identity from last year. We're not shaking that." And he's changed quite a bit. Like it's small ball, it's tons of activity offensively. The ball is out of Brown and Tatum's hands more often now, and they showed some looks early in camp at practice of going double big and playing huge like they did last year. But he hasn't wanted to do that. Like I said, we haven't seen a lot of Cornette. We haven't seen a lot of Horford at the 4. Guys have been playing down a position pretty much across the lineup here. And when you look at Grant, he's crucial for them to be able to do that because he can switch to pretty much every position. And
he won't get bullied. I mean, yeah. I think the Cavs really bullied the Celtics, especially to open that game with their size. And there's more and more teams that can do that. So if Horford gets in foul trouble and, until Robert Williams is back and healthy, I do feel like they're a little bit vulnerable there, and Williams helps insulate against that.
Yeah, and so it's been better on offense. I think they're a top 5 offense still as we record this, and defensively they've fallen off the map. So do you gain in one area and lose in another? We're going to have to see over a larger sample size here. Some guys have been in and out of the lineup too. There's been more of a schematic shift for them, but they've lost a lot on that defensive end. Again, those 2 offensive rebounds Cleveland got in crunch time, those have been happening through the early portion of the schedule here. So they get hit with timely offensive rebounds that have hurt them. Guys are getting attacked one-on-one in ways that you didn't really see last year. And again, just look at that final score, 132 for Cleveland. I know scoring is up across the league, but that is not something you saw from the Celtics defensively last year.
No, I was really surprised by the Celtics perimeter defense. Like you understand that they're missing some backline help, but it just feels like they're still kind of in that early season mode where I don't know if it's like NBA Finals hangover and just a veteran team that understands it's 82, but it feels like individually they have so many good defenders on the perimeter, and the effort level didn't seem to be there. It felt like they had another gear there, and the fact that Karis LeVert, Donovan Mitchell, and all those guys were able to get going in the ways that they did, I think that was a reflection of just a poor defensive game for a lot of those guys on the perimeter. Do you think having Grant Williams back will change that dynamic at all, or do you still feel like, hey, this is still, even though it's a rematch of that Friday game, they still understand it's a long season. They're still waiting for Robert Williams to get back, and I don't expect them to kick into that gear just yet.
No, I think they're frustrated, and Brogdon after the film session on Saturday, right after the game, was pretty pissed in his press conference. He was calling them out for their effort on that end and needing to be more connected, and he feels like offense is impacting their defense when it comes to focus right now. So they're not looking at it and saying, oh, maybe this turns around or some guys come back and we figure this stuff out. Like they're trying to jump on that and fix it. And to their credit, they come out on Sunday and hold Beal to 0 for 11 start. Washington was dreadful, falls behind 24. Offensively, they were just a mess going against Boston on that end. Grant comes back, as you say, and helps. I think Cornette looked a little bit more comfortable in that game, too, playing his second time around.
And Washington has weapons, right? Like they got offensive guys that can really go out and score.
Barton, Porzingis gave them some trouble at times. Porzingis, you forget how good he still is, even though he's been through all these injuries and stuff. So, yeah, that was impressive, even though I don't think they're one of the better teams in the East. But that's the thing, Boston, they were the favorites in the East to start this year. The conference is so good. You rattle off every opponent, maybe save for Indiana and Orlando, and they're feisty in their own right. You're going to meet a challenge every game, and you can't come out and just kind of coast and go off that NBA final status that you had. And I thought Joe Mazzulla had his first like real call to the team too, saying that like we have to learn how to win again. And we followed up with that on him the next day on Saturday, and he said, habits aren't necessarily going to carry over from last year. Like even though we were number one on defense last year and we figured out all this stuff, everyone's 0-0 again, and we're kind of back at square one. So we have to establish that again. And they're definitely on the early stages to that. The way it's looked so far, it hasn't been pretty.
Yeah, I think about that first play in overtime. I talked about it a couple times on this podcast about how cool it was to see Donovan, who had played so many minutes in that game, sprint around on that floppy action and hit the three, but also on that play, terrible miscommunication from Smart and Brown off ball. They got mixed up. Too. And that this was a team that for the entire back half of the year just made no mistakes for entire games. They're
not navigating screens well. Yeah. And that's interesting because last year, obviously, they were on a string switching. They were the most switchy team in the NBA. And those are two guys who obviously played a ton in those lineups and making those switches. So to see those guys struggling to make those kind of reads definitely speaks to this being not so much a personnel or a scheme issue, though they have adjusted the scheme a little bit. These guys are disconnected a little bit right now, and they're going to have to fix that. I find it interesting. Horford and Smart, two of you look at their lineup, those are probably like the two sturdiest defenders in the lineup, the defensive player of the year last year. They have the worst defensive rating on this team right now. So This isn't a matter of personnel. And this isn't a matter of new scheme or guys integrating in. Like these are their key guys who really have to lock in. And to their credit, I think Tatum and Brown have been awesome on that end so far. Really locking guys up when they need to, making key blocks off the backboard when they were down in some early games. They've been great. I think it's some of the other guys who have to step up. And Smart did kind of talk about him not being 100% healthy to start this year. He took a slip and a fall up in Montreal on the hockey ice in that preseason game. So his obliques flaring up a little bit.
Well, slipping and falling is part of his signature moves. Like that is his bag to slip, fall, fly all over the place. Hey, it really worked on that one Harden play though. So, maybe it's kind of like Luke Cornett jumping up and psyching people out. Where if Smart just slides across the floor, the shooter is going to get distracted.
Yeah.
But I definitely think your point about how Boston is navigating screens is a really important thing to highlight going into this matchup, because whether Garland's back or not, obviously the Cavs do implement a lot of pick and roll. They like to disguise what they're doing, and especially if Garland is back. That's one of those kind of styles make fights kind of thing where, the Cavs are at a disadvantage from a roster standpoint in terms of not having an established wing like Boston has in Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. But what they do have is very high level guard play, multiple ball handlers that are very good in the pick and roll. Jared Allen, Robin Lopez, Kevin Love, Evan Mobley starting to make a little more contact on screens, although that's still an area of improvement. But when you have that many ball handlers and screen setters, you're going to have to be crisp when you make those decisions. And it seems like when the Cavs play against some of these defenses, it almost wears the defense down like a good running game in the NFL, where all of a sudden later in the fourth quarter, you're starting to make mistakes. And when you have a talented ball handler like Donovan Mitchell, he's making those reads. So I'm very curious to see how Boston navigates the screens in that matchup.
Yeah, Bobby, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Bob.
Well, I was going to say real quick on that, like they're buying into this, and you're seeing it a lot around the league. I don't know how much the Cavs do it, but like teams drop like crazy now with their centers just to take away that paint area.
Playing 2-on-2.
Celtics are buying into that now, and it really does put so much onus on that screen navigation because it's all on the perimeter player at that point. Like they have to get through, they have to contest around the screen, whereas last year they were switching everything, so you didn't have to worry about that as much because it was pretty much automatic that you're going to switch 1 through 5, and they're kind of defending more like the Bucks now, where it's just that center and that deep drop. All the perimeter guys have to find their way through it, and like you said, if you're setting good solid screens, if you're the Cavs, you're pretty much freeing up guys for wide open shots.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about the Cavs style of play, because something I might have talked about this with you on your podcast, but last season, Grant Williams said that Darius was one of his toughest covers in the league, and that was part of the reason why I was pretty confident that the Warriors would have a really good shot in the finals, because I've long suspected that, despite the fact that Boston is obviously an amazing defensive team, but I feel like they are really built in a way to stop these big hulking wings. They're built to throw 3-4 huge bodies at Giannis that can take those hits and absorb them. Have you found that they have a little bit of a harder time with kind of the water bug style point guards that are, all little, spurts and skills and pull up threes?
Yeah, we've talked about that on our post-game show, the Garden Report, for years now, especially with Smart. Like, this guy can defend centers. He can guard the perimeter like no one else, but he is a bigger body at that point guard spot, and, a little heavier, a little stronger. So if you do get a guy with a low center of gravity, a shorter guy, like a Mitchell and a Garland in this backcourt, they've been able to get by him with some speed. And I think that's the case, like, across the lineup. Even if a Horford's going to go out and defend the perimeter, like, these are bigger guys trying to, get down low and defend these guys who have these really quick first steps. You name some of these quick guards in the league, De'Aaron Fox, Jamal Murray back in his day before the injury. Some of these guys with great bursts at that position, great speed, Curry as well, you name them. They've had an impact against the Celtics in recent years here, where they've gone bigger, where they've tried to put all these different wings across the perimeter to guard. I think that's 100% salient. Though I will say Smart did a much better job with that last year. I think you sort of see his effectiveness against those guys, especially, flow with his health, because a lot of time I feel like he is kind of playing through some pain and is limited in his lateral movement during those times, and he has talked about that early this year. So that's a matchup I'm looking at. Who's going to guard Garland in that game if he does play? You would think it'd be Smart. That might be a tough matchup for the Celtics there if he's not playing at full strength defensively right now.
Yeah, you almost wonder if it's going to be Derek White, just because White.
That's a good point.
White does have he's the more I feel like the better lateral athlete, and Donovan Mitchell's built like a tank. So
White's a great defender, and Boston's had their fans have had mixed reactions to him so far, because I feel like the offensive output isn't quite what it looked like in San Antonio, where he would just always have these great scoring games. It's been more limited usage. He's more of a catch and shoot guy in Boston so far, and he has really struggled to shoot. But defensively, you can see why he's in that like all defensive consideration. He fits right in with this lineup. Like, his screen navigation probably as good as anyone's on the team. He gets around those quick. He stays with guys on the perimeter. He did a great job on Curry for the early portion of the finals before he broke out. So that addition, almost a year later here, still looks great. Still looks like it fits right in with this team, and he's starting. So yeah, he is a guy that you could throw on Garland to start.
Yeah, I'm really curious what this ends up looking like, especially if Darius Garland starts. And I mean, it's so funny because I feel like so often the conversation around defense is like basically a checkbox for a player. Like, do they do defense, when there's so much more nuance that goes into it? And I completely agree. I think Derek White would be the better guy to throw on to Darius in those situations.
And then Smart on Mitchell. Yeah.
But the ripple effect of that is on the other side is if Garland is starting, that means Dean Wade isn't out there at the small forward and Karis LeVert is sliding over to the small forward position, which I think would mean Karis guards Jaylen Brown, Mobley on to Tatum. How do you think that adjustment, do you think that's something that benefits the Celtics? Because obviously the Cavs small forward rotation is kind of one of the major talking points when there's just so much confidence in what both the backcourt and the big man pairing can do.
Yeah, that definitely, I think, could end up being a mismatch. And again, I don't think there's many matchup defensively that aren't right now for Brown and Tatum, the way they're playing offensively. I mean, to start with Tatum, he's getting ahead of defenses, which has been deadly, and he's getting easy looks in transition, which has been a huge shakeup for him. But he's also moving off the ball and moving around some off-ball screens. So there's going to be a lot, I think, of indecision on the Cleveland end in terms of trying to keep up with him. He's shooting well to start this year. I mean, he was just raining to start that game. And then on the other other side, Brown, his rim pressure that he's putting on teams is immense. And even for a team like Cleveland that has these great rim protectors like Mobley and Allen,
some of his transition buckets were so good, man.
Oh yeah, and then there was one moment where he went right at Mobley and got an and one through him like it was nothing, and that's one of the best defenders in the league. So these guys put enormous pressure in terms of their size and their skill right now on defenses, and it almost looks right now like there's not much that you can do to try to counter them. Though I do think the Cavs did a great move late in the game of throwing a like last second double at Tatum as he was sizing them up. He kind of swung it back to Smart, and Smart had Brogdon wide open in the corner and traveled on that play. And that ended up becoming one of the key defensive stops the Cavs got down the stretch. So a timely double on Tatum, if he is on the ball in crunch time, I think can still have an impact, but he's countered that by getting off the ball and letting the guards make plays.
Yeah. We've spent a lot of time talking about the Cavs offense, and Cavs offense was fine against Boston, but I do think it's their defense that won them the game in the fourth quarter and overtime. I think they held Boston to like 70 offensive rating in the fourth quarter. Do you think do you think that's more of, Boston not meeting the moment, or do you think the Cavs kind of figured something out with how they were defending Boston?
They did a good job funneling the ball over to Smart, and again, the Celtics had Cornet out there at one point, so that's like a guy you don't even have to account for offensively, so that helps too. But at the same time, teams have done a good job at this. The better teams that Boston's faced over the years is getting the ball out of the Jays' hands, funneling it to some guys that struggled to shoot, and Smart, who was really off in that game. I think he went 3 for 14, 3 or 15. Yeah, so they did a good job funneling the ball to him for some big looks late that he missed wide open. Mitchell, I think, got a good contest on the second one. And then you didn't have Brogdon on the floor until that late stage, and they really weren't able to get him the ball either. So that does show in these big moments that even though Boston's overall output offensively has been good, they do have some decision-making and some approach growth to be had on that end of the floor, because they do get stagnant. I mean, we saw it in the finals, saw it against the Heat, saw it in spots all of last year. And so I'd give it a little bit to both. I thought the Cavs did a good job funneling the ball back to Smart, and I think the Celtics really got stagnant there. I mean, look at that last shot against Wade. Tatum's just standing there and
terrible attempt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think both of these teams have questions about how they're going to react to all these big moments, and Wednesday's going to be a great example of that. But we know in big moments, our partner Zoom is always ready for support. Support for this podcast and the following message comes from Zoom. 500,000 businesses connect using Zoom, a single platform for phone, chat, workspaces, events, apps, and video. Zoom enables real-time collaboration for teams around the globe. Zoom, how the world connects. Bobby, one parallel I think with these teams, at least in my eyes right now, is both Tatum and Mitchell appear to have taken a meaningful step forward. Both of them are around 31 points per game. Mitchell 7 assists, Tatum 7 rebounds, Tatum 3.5 assists, Mitchell like 3.5 rebounds or whatever. Like both of these guys appear to have kind of, it's ridiculous to talk MVP talk this early in the season, but both of them are putting up those kinds of performances if they continue throughout the year. What to you has stood out? We'll start with Tatum. What has stood out from his step forward that he has made so far this season?
I think just the willingness to do the little things. And that started last year. Great defensive season from him. I thought reminiscent of early in his career when he was a role guy, and he's talked a lot about
who would have thought that coming out of Duke, by the way.
Yeah. And he's talked about that. Like, he wasn't going to play early on that Brad Stevens team. It was stacked with talent if he wasn't going to defend. And so he had to do that early in his first camp, and flowed into the Gordon Hayward injury and getting that opportunity. And he's really become a great defender ever since across a bunch of different positions. And last year, I thought he locked in and reached a new level in that switching scheme. And this year to start, like, he's defending a bunch of different positions, help side, he's on the ball, he's everywhere on that end, and a great rebounder on top of it. But offensively, you didn't see him do those little things as well. Like, he would never set a screen. He would never get off the ball. He'd never run up the floor. The offense would just be kind of like plodding when he would be on the ball, and there'd be no pace at all. To see him flying around the way he is, like getting up the floor, finding a mismatch, catching the ball and finishing inside, staying a screen and rolling off another guy. Like, there's just such a willingness for him to do all these little things. And, that's on the floor. Off the floor, obviously this team entered the season with a lot of turmoil. I think he's really embraced this vocal leadership role. Like to start last year, Ime was trying to name captains. Him, Smart, Brown, they weren't thrilled about it, and the idea kind of fell through. This year, like he's just embracing that role. There was a story that when they were on the Sports Illustrated cover, it was just supposed to be Brown and Tatum, and he kind of stepped up and said that Smart needs to be on there too. Obviously, Smart kind of sees himself as part of that leadership core in the team, so they didn't want to exclude him from that. I thought that was great. There's been a lot of great quotes, kind of hyping up teammates and just sort of asserting like different things they need to do. He's found his voice, and Al Horford and others talked about him finding it in the playoffs in a way that he wasn't doing earlier in his career. Because you'd ask him about leadership early, like even a year ago, and he'd be like, yeah, I'm a quiet guy, but that's just how I am. I'm going to lead by example. And, you guys might not like that, but I'm going to do it my way. And now it's sort of the opposite. Like, I do have to speak up more. I'm in like a frontline position on this team. And when you don't have a coach from last year, who I thought was kind of the public face of this team, he stepped in and filled that gap, because Joe Mazzulla said, like, I'm going to have to rely on these players. Like, I'm in a position where I'm taking a big leap here, and it's going to have to be these players who are really the leaders on this team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you have a leadership void like that, like having your star player step up in that way is so meaningful, right? And it's funny because I when you mentioned like Tatum saying, I'm not really a vocal leader, I think back to even Jared Allen on Media Day at the beginning of last year, kind of saying the same thing, like, yeah, I'm the backline defender, but I kind of let my play do the talking. And now, like, as you get more comfortable with a team, understanding what your responsibilities are with your teammates and how you stack into that, you see Allen being more vocal. You see Mobley being more vocal, right? And I think when you get into a situation where everybody has their role, they have their jobs, everything's defined, and you kind of have an understanding, especially Tatum going on that finals run. You get an increased appreciation for how much all those little things matter, how much talking matters, how much leadership matters in those spots. So I think that's the benefit of experience, right? Where you get that experience of seeing how those little things matter and how that all adds up to winning, and you step up and fulfill that role.
Yeah, Mitchell, when he was on JJ Redick's podcast, both of them talked about the value of chirping on the court. Like, just talk. Doesn't matter what you're talking about. Like, train your muscles to start talking. If you're wrong about, like, and Donnie even talked about, I'm calling out coverages that are the wrong name right now because I don't know our verbiage yet, but I'm still talking. I'm working my way through it. Like it is like a kind of thing that you do have to teach yourself. And I think, for people like Tatum and for a ton of members of this Cavaliers team, Evan is soft-spoken. Jared is soft-spoken. Darius is not exactly the loudest guy in the room. All of them, I think, have had to totally kind of figure this out on the fly, and it's not nothing. There's a reason most of the great leaders in basketball have been vocal leaders, because you have even Tim Duncan, even though he's not a super gregarious guy with the media, he was always the leader of that team, and it was very, very obvious, and he was very vocal. So it's cool watching these young players kind of figure it out in real time. Speaking of figuring it out in real time, Donovan Mitchell is playing the best basketball of his career. What have you seen out of him, Bob?
He's just dynamic, and he always has been. But I even, talked to JV pregame when he was in Boston about that, and it's playmaking so far, right? You lose Garland in that first game, and all of a sudden Mitchell has to take on point guard duties, and he's got 7 assists per game. Not something you really saw from him in Utah. I thought that playmaking was probably, along with his defense, was the two bigger weaknesses there in Utah that held them back at times. And he just fits right in. You say, he's learning concepts, he's learning teammates right here, and he hit the ground running, and they're just putting up these ginormous offensive performances. And again, he has 41 in that game himself, which we know he can do against Boston there. But to set up LeVert too, who I just thought was in this kind of weird place coming into this year. Does he have a role? Is he a starter on the wing? Is he part of this team's future? They don't extend him. And all of a sudden he's out there scoring 41 in tandem with Mitchell. And you see the ways that Mitchell is getting off the ball to help set him up and put him in positions to succeed. That's good leadership. And I wasn't sure, like, you come out of Utah last year and it's like, all right, was that Rudy's fault? Was it Mitchell's fault for not?
Were they just over each other as a group?
Yeah. So you're wondering like what went wrong there and what's going to linger in Cleveland. And I'll let you guys lean on the defense because I haven't gotten a good feel for how he's played defensively so far. But offensively, it looks like he can just do everything for this team and be an engine. I mean, I love JB quipping that we're not quite an equal opportunity offense because there's going to be a lot of Mitchell running the show here. And, sometimes that's going to be him on the ball. Sometimes it's going to be him helping set up guys off the ball.
Well, I think talking about his playmaking but in even a wider sense, the decision making from him is much more advanced than I thought it would be. I don't know about you, Justin, but I expected that part of having a guy like Donovan Mitchell on your team, that it would come with the territory of groaning at 3 or 4 shots a night. Come on, man. Not that one right now, that's kind of what you get with uber gunners like this. And I have not really felt that way. I mean, every now and then, like maybe 2 or 3 times in the first 6 games where I've gone, yeah, Donnie, you didn't need to take that one.
That was a heat check.
Yeah, but like other than that, like I feel like he's mostly made the right decisions with the ball, and that was really not my expectation. I thought he could, he could get them into their sets fine. He could hit open shooters, but like his general feel in read of the floor has been so much better than expected for me.
Bobby, was there something schematically, because when you were talking there, you reminded me of a conversation that's going on right now, which is basically what is different this year? Like, obviously, Mitchell's now 26 years old. He had talked about what he needed to do as an individual to get better in the offseason, to get his conditioning better and to play at the level that he wanted to play at. But is there anything schematically that you saw that the Cavs are doing with him offensively to get him going and unlock him in ways that you didn't necessarily see as much in Utah? Or do you think this is kind of just, the progression of his career and where he's at as an individual?
I think you can play through your bigs more in Cleveland, which is a good thing. You're able to post those guys up and feel good about that. You have a good off-ball screener who's developing, as you've talked about in Mobley. I go back to that play Carter talked about where they're running Mitchell around the screen that basically created some indecision on Boston's defense and freed him up for a wide open shot. So he doesn't have to attack head on as much with this team. Like I feel like Utah, it was just spread out, let him drive, collapse, and kick it out to a shooter. And then you had this big and Rudy who really doesn't give you much offensively. Well, Allen, it's, you can throw it into him and he'll dunk on a guy. You can have different outlets and even different ball handlers, like the way he trusted LeVert. I go back to that in this game to make plays at times for him and others and himself. It was all really impressive. And again, the Cavs, where are they in the league now? They're top 10, they're top 5 offensively. That's really impressive stuff because they don't
top
have
5 on both ends right now.
They don't have a ton of shooting. They you don't look at their personnel on offense, and it's like they're not loaded at every position with offensive talent. But you have all these guys that can do little things to free each other up and just make the game easier for each other. And I think Mitchell's buying into that early and often. And after doing what he did for years in Utah, and I think he's talked about this, you guys would know better than me. There's probably a desire on his part to fit into a team, not just be the center of the universe on offense and put up these massive stats, even though he will have to do that at times for this group.
Yeah, and to me, it's interesting because, and I want to say on the front end, I'm not assigning a virtue to either of these kind of styles of play, but like I think the Quinn Snyder offense was more similar to what Steve Kerr runs, right? Where it's really equal opportunity, ball movement. And one of the kind of common refrains you hear from Warriors fans is sometimes they just want like, let's spam some Steph pick and roll, right? Like even if we're not doing it all the time, like let's work that in. Whereas JB, I feel it's almost a little more similar to what like Ty Lue will do, right? Where it's all right, we're going to mask what we're doing. We're going to work in pick and roll. We're going to do a bunch of stuff to get the defense destabilized, and then we're going to trust our individual offensive talents to make the reads, right? And we're going to have something going on the weak side so that the defender, you're going to be giving up something no matter what, and we trust that our playmakers are going to be able to make those reads, whether it's Garland, whether it's Mitchell, whether it's Mobley. These guys are going to make reads in those situations, and I really do feel kind of playing in that style. Mitchell seems to really embrace it right now. And I think maybe Darius being out at the start kind of helped him find his footing as well, because it's okay. There's not any kind of you don't have to figure out the hierarchy in the same way. Obviously, this team's going to be a lot better when those two figure out how to play together, and they're both going. But especially getting into a new situation, it's okay. It's my show. I've got these weapons around this, and I'm going to make these reads with these guys.
So that's what I'm interested to see now is, you go after this great start, you're top 5 in offense, you're top 5 in defense, and you overcome this Garland loss, but everybody's kind of in their spot right now and thriving in that role.
Yeah.
Is it, you're getting Garland back and you love that, but is it tougher to kind of integrate him in now and shift LeVert down to the 3 defensively and have him with less ball time? Like, that's going to be interesting to me, maybe starting as soon as tomorrow, to see the impact of a guy that important coming back and stepping in when he really hasn't played a ton with these guys.
And especially when things are going great, like that's, it is going to be an adjustment. I think that, they are going to have to figure out how to play together. I think the biggest
I'll say this.
Yeah, go ahead.
You talk about what kind of mismatches Boston could have against Garland, and him going at their bigger guy. They'll send Tatum and Brown at Garland defensively. They'll be trying to attack him out there, and that's something he's going to have to. Then they're going to have to adjust to as a team.
Yeah, I totally agree, and that's what I'm fascinated with, because there's been, I think, some early victory laps with Cavs Twitter and with basketball community at large that, hey, still top 5 defense, added, this supposed sieve and Donovan Mitchell, but they're still an elite defensive team. Mobley and Allen solve everything. Hooray. But the reality is, ever since Wade was inserted in the starting lineup, they're still playing huge. They're still playing Dean Wade, who's 6'8", 6'9", Mobley and Allen, with a Donovan Mitchell Karras backcourt who are 6'2", 6'3", and 6'6", 6'7". That's an enormous lineup, and so they're still playing 2021 Cavaliers basketball defensively. So
and now it's going to be 2 smaller guards and really a smaller wing in LeVert, if that's the way they're going to go.
Yeah. And I do actually think Boston's an interesting matchup, because Boston's going 2 guards as well, right? Like with Smart and White, you got LeVert on Brown, and then Mobley versus Tatum is kind of the most interesting one. But as you run guys through screens, you get switches, you try to expose those mismatches. And even though Garland took a big step forward last year defensively, same thing that happened with Steph Curry, right? Just because you're a good positional defender doesn't mean when you get switched onto a 6'10" small forward that there isn't going to be advantages created with that. And I think one of the holes we've seen with the Cavs defense, at least so far this year, has been, okay, when the offense does kind of slow down and things aren't flowing, teams get out in transition, right? They take advantage of those turnovers, the mistakes, those growing pains all turn into pick sixes the other way. And maybe your hope is, hey, when we've got Garland, Mitchell, and LeVert out there, that we're going to push the tempo, we're going to be more potent offensively, and that's going to eliminate some of those transition opportunities. And therefore, if we give up a few more opportunities in the half court, it's not going to hurt us as much. Maybe it's a game where we just see more staggering, right? Like, these are the type of questions that make a matchup like this so fascinating to me, and I just can't wait to see what this game will be.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see how that wing spot develops for the Cavs. Like, it's great that you find this force in LeVert early this year, but doesn't he come out after 41 and what was it, 3 against the Knicks?
One.
Yeah,
41, then 1. What a time.
I saw that sigh. I saw that sigh. That sigh told me, because I've done this a million times with the Cavs. It's, why did they have to have that game against us? Why were we the 41 instead of the 1?
Well, that's
the Knicks had to have that with Dean Wade, so Yeah,
that's true.
So this was my question, and again, I lead up to this crescendo. I think this Cavs team could make the finals. Like, that's how good I think they are. Even in a loaded East, even with all these different competitors, they've proven it to me early, and I like this team on paper to begin with. I think they have good coaching. I think they have great personnel that's only going to get better as this year goes on. Who knows? They might even have a move under their belt, because I don't know about that wing spot. It's so important. I'm sure every game you're going into it this year, it's going to be like, oh, how do they deal with Barrett, and how do they deal with Tatum, and how do they deal with Giannis in this game? Because LeVert's off to this great start. Okoro's been so disappointing, because I thought he was going to be the guy who would emerge at that spot. And then you have Wade, who's this great complementary player. But when you trade Markkanen, And obviously you do that 10 times out of 10 for Mitchell. You leave that gap and Agbaju's not there to potentially grow into that role. And you don't have those picks to add another guy. Osman's been great so far, I've seen, but there's no stable force there so far. And you really hope LeVert can become that. But are you guys super hopeful about that?
So I'll say this about Karras, because the field goal percentage has been atrocious to start the year. But you know what isn't that atrocious is his true shooting percentage, because he's hitting threes and he's taking them at a really good rate. You know,
throws too, yeah.
So you know, I think he's really working to adjust his game. I think he is working to I think he's working really, really hard on the defensive end, and he, for the first time in his career, is a good plus minus guy right now. So, you know, if the field goal percentage kind of comes back to earth a little bit, then all of a sudden we're feeling really, really good about Caris LeVert. What's nice is, they have all these options that kind of feel like half measures, but they only really need to have like 1.5 of them hit to feel really good about this team. So whether it's Karras hitting or Dean Wade, who's playing the best basketball of his career with the best 3-point rate and make rate of his career, the 3-point shot looks so good for him right now.
Where did he come from?
Kansas State. He was undrafted. I think he broke his foot right at the end of his senior year and went undrafted. But he plays as good of defense on these big wings as anyone on the team. I thought he did a great job on Tatum down the stretch for that matter. Jetty is electric when he's on. So they have a lot of options. It's just, and luckily they got a coach who's like, whoever's good is going to get to play. So,
that's the biggest
I'm not
thing,
super
right?
worried about it, I guess.
They all bring something to the table. Like Jetty, Wade, and LeVert, I think, are the three that are playing really well right now. And I still have hope that Isaac Okoro, when you make a change to your jump shot, you can tell he's definitely in his own head right now, but he's been a more productive offensive player than in the past. He's been more productive than he has been this season. But right now, if you have LeVert, Jetty, and Wade playing well, you might just have to, certain matchups are going to be more of a Dean Wade matchup. This one's going to be more of a Caris LeVert. And you can kind of play around with that rotation. Yes, it would be great if you had someone that combined all of those attributes and you had some sort of set it and forget it small forward that you never had to think about. But at the same time, when you do have that high-end guard play, you have the high-end interior defense with Mobley and Allen, it allows flexibility. What you need from that position is less. And ultimately, what you're trying to do is get effective 5-man units. And I think they have a lot of options to go to in that spot.
Yeah, it's just a counter to what the rest of the league's doing, which is interesting because most good teams have that stability at the wing. And, every team's going to have a weakness,
I blame the
right?
Clippers. The Clippers,
they took them
all the wings in the league. Clippers and Raptors are taking every 6'9" player in the league, and I don't like it.
Well, Cavs are zagging there, so I'm very interested to see how that works.
Well, here's the thing, man.
Players.
There is, I think right now the perception is that whoever gets the most playable wings is the one who's gonna make it the first in the playoffs. But the reality is the Cavs are kind of not built that way. When it comes to winning time, Darius is going to be playing 38 minutes a game. Donovan's going to be playing 38 minutes a game. Evan's going to be playing 38 minutes a game, and so is Jarrett. So at a certain point, you're invested in those 4 guys. You're invested in a play style. Sure, you might have a game where you might end up playing a little smaller, a little smaller, or a little bit bigger based on the matchups. But we're not talking 3 or 4 players that are going to get those minutes. Really, it's probably 2 or 3, because when it really matters, they're going to have to play their best players the minutes, and it's either going to work or it's not. So that's why I'm kind of not as obsessed about the wing thing as everyone else. I just think they need one really good one.
Mm-hmm.
It could be Mo. I know he's more of a big tendency wise, but he'll be guard and wing guys. And if he can pile up stops on some of those great players, as you think he'll be able to here into this dominant defensive career that looks like he's going to have, that helps quite a bit. And you'll be able to deploy him on a bunch of different guys.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as Carter. I don't find it to be as interesting of a conversation, but I do think it's uniquely interesting when you play a team like Boston, right? It's these kind of matchups that are going to be informative on.
Yeah. Okay, it's evidence to see if this is going to work or not.
Yeah. Yeah, what adjustments are we going to make in these matchups? Is Karras able to hold his own? Like, if Karras is able to hold his own defensively against Jaylen Brown, and you feel comfortable with a trade-off, or if Dean Wade is able to give you good minutes defending Jason Tatum as he did on Friday, that's going to make you feel better. And again, you're just looking for that proof of concept. But with you saying that you feel like the Cavs are a team that on paper could make the finals, where do you kind of rank these teams in the Eastern Conference? Like, if you want to do it by tiers, if you want to do it by numbers, how do you kind of see the top of the East shaking out in your eyes?
So coming in, I gave Philly the benefit of the doubt at the top. I thought they just Embiid, Harden, pick and roll to oblivion, and that would get them through, along with some great defense from Embiid and others there. But it's been the opposite. It's Harden ball hogging and Embiid looking hot-rolled, and their defense being a disaster. So I'm ranking them down quite a bit. They're probably in that lower half. The way this is looking, I'm upgrading the Cavs, so I probably had in like that 5-6 territory to a team that looks like it's home court worthy. I'm downgrading Miami to that bottom half. I really don't like how they look right now. This looks like they could be one of the bigger disappointments in the league, the way they're getting off to a start here. And I love the Bucks. Like, I respect them always. I'm stunned I didn't put them one, and they look like that one. Defensively, they're in a league of their own right now. Giannis is just that guy. He the unquestioned number one in the league. And then you have a mix there right below them. Like, I think the Celtics could be two. I think the Cavs are up there in 3 or 4 territory as well. I love the Raptors. They've been uneven and inconsistent to start this year, but Siakam still looks all NBA worthy. You've added
They just beat Atlanta by 30 without Van Vliet. That was a bit of a surprise.
Yeah, and like they just grow more interchangeable and more versatile defensively with each passing year. Like, I was up in Montreal and they're hyping up this guy Christian Coloco, 2nd-round pick, and look at him. All of a sudden, he's playing starting minutes and fitting right in with this big, versatile group. I love that team. Love what they're doing. They're another top half group for me. And then to round it out, you could stand in line up there. Like, I don't know how to feel about them. I don't love their roster.
Their schedule was tissue paper soft to start the year, and I think we're starting to see them have to go and play some really good teams, and to mixed results. A loss against the Bucks that was competitive, and then just got boat raced by the Raptors. So we'll see. I'm holding a little skepticism against the Hawks right now.
I always do. I don't love their roster. I don't know how the Murray young thing's going to work, but they knock off a bunch of wins. Their defense shows a little stability early. There's some optimism there, I think, that's warranted, especially when you see some other teams fading, like a Philly, like a
Miami,
Chicago,
man. They might be falling to 2-6 tonight if they don't come back against the Warriors.
I was down in Miami for the second game of the year between Boston and them, and it is weird vibes down there. Like, I don't know what is going on. You got the Lowry thing. Spo's not even talking about his game when he's getting asked questions about Lowry. Strus is on the bench, even though he's playing well, and Hero's with the starters now. And Bam's, getting frustrated with refs and barking at them. And like, there's just weird vibes around that team. And normally when you look at them, everybody's in sync, and they're all on a string, and young guys who you don't even know are stepping up. And that wasn't happening. So I don't know what's going on down there. They obviously had a weird offseason. Victor Oladipo's back on a big deal and not really even playing. They're a real candidate to step back. And I thought Jimmy was really passive in that game too. So I don't love the vibes around them at all right now. Although I didn't like them last year either, and they ended up being the 1 seed. So we'll see.
Well, the good news is the Cavs have immaculate vibes right now. And absolutely immaculate vibes. Bobby, thank you so much for coming on. Honestly, really appreciate your time. A lot of great insight here. Again, I'm fighting this cold, and I think if I go through your byline, I might actually pass out. So how about instead you let our listeners know what you got going on, what you want them to check out before we wrap this thing up?
So I cover the Celtics day in and day out with CLNS Media. We might have to go down to Brooklyn for a certain press conference in the next couple of days, so stay tuned for that. There's a certain coach that might be getting hired down in Brooklyn. We'll see. But we got Celtics blog, where I've been blogging for 6 years now. Boston Sports Journal, I write a national column there, NBA, every week on Saturday. Greg Bedard's great site, mostly known for Patriots, but we got NBA content over there as well. And then Dome Theory, where both these guys have appeared on CLNS Media, my podcast. We actually just had Justin on today, so it was a crossover day for Celtics Cavs, and a good fun one.
Well, thank you so much, Bobby. Really appreciate your insight. And a big thanks to our listeners as well. If you're watching live on YouTube, like, subscribe, click the notification bell so you know when we're going live. If you want to be part of the Chase Down's exclusive Discord chat, you can send a screenshot of your pod review to chasedownpod@gmail.com. If you want to leave that review, again, I've messed up my entire outro here because I'm sick and I'm on cold medication.
Oh, you're gonna run out of time on this
leave
bumper,
us a rating,
man.
leave a review, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, and help cook those books. And until next time, go Cavs.
You made it, buddy. Bye, guys.